Why does a broken glass sometimes speak louder than a gunshot? The whiskey hit the floor, not with a crash, with a wet, flat slap, the sound that silence makes when it swallows a room whole. Amber liquid spread across dusty concrete like a dark accusation. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned. The off-duty operators, men who'd seen blood and fire, suddenly couldn't look away from something as simple as spilled alcohol. But it wasn't the glass that held their attention. It was her. The woman who'd just been shoved. The woman who hadn't stumbled. Her feet, planted in worn leather boots, had shifted less than an inch. Her body absorbed the force with an unnatural stillness, like a tree rooted deep while a storm passes overhead. Her own glass remained steady in her hand, the whiskey barely touching the rim. She looked at the shattered glass on the floor, then at the man's chest, then finally, slowly, at his eyes. Her expression was unreadable, a placid mask of calm that seemed to infuriate him more than any verbal retort could have. He was used to reactions, fear, anger, submission. He was not used to being observed like a problem in fluid dynamics. The pressure in the room built, a physical thing you could taste. Someone coughed. Someone else shifted their weight. The scrape of a boot loud in the quiet. The young man, Specialist Cole, puffed out his chest. He was new to this unit, eager to establish his place in the hierarchy through the time-honored currency of aggression. He'd mistaken her quiet presence, her plain clothes, her lack of participation in their loud stories of conquest for weakness. He'd seen an outsider, a civilian analyst perhaps, or some logistics officer out of her depth, and he'd decided she was a target. His shove had been a test, a casual assertion of dominance. Her lack of response was a failure of that test, a miscalculation that was now unraveling in front of his peers. He had expected her to fall, to cry out, to spill her drink. Instead, she stood like a rock in a river, the current of his arrogance parting around her. Her gaze held his, calm and analytical, and in that gaze he felt a flicker of something he didn't recognize, a cold, deep competence that had nothing to do with muscle and everything to do with will. He had made a mistake. He didn't know the shape of it yet, but the silence of the men around him, men who normally would have laughed and cheered him on, told him it was significant. The air grew heavy with unspoken questions. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her whiskey, her eyes never leaving his. The only sound was the soft click of her glass returning to the scarred wooden bar top. One must learn that the loudest person in the room is often the least dangerous. The place called itself the Wolf's Den. It was less a bar and more a temporary structure of plywood and corrugated steel dropped onto the perimeter of Forward Operating Base Kestrel, a windswept outpost in a country whose name changed depending on the decade's politics. Dust, fine as powdered sugar, coated every surface, a constant reminder of the vast, unforgiving desert that stretched for 1,000 miles in every direction. The air inside was thick with the smell of stale beer, sweat, and ozone from the humming generators that powered the single string of yellow bulbs overhead. This was a place for decompression, a pressure valve for men living on a razor's edge. Tonight, the valve was being tested. The woman, Rear Admiral Anna Sharma, was here under the guise of a strategic oversight review. She wore simple canvas trousers and a gray Henley, her dark hair pulled back in a severe knot, her rank insignia tucked away in a locker, her identity known only to the base commanding officer and his most senior non-commissioned officer, Master Chief Petty Officer Thorne. To the dozen or so operators of Naval Special Warfare Development Group's Echo Squadron gathered here, she was nameless, faceless. A presence from headquarters, someone to be tolerated and ignored. They were the tip of the spear. She was, in their eyes, the bureaucracy that held the shaft. Master Chief Thorne sat at the far end of the bar, nursing a bottle of water, his face a road map of hard-won experience. He watched the scene unfold with practiced neutrality, but his eyes, missing nothing, held a glint of weary anticipation. He'd seen this ritual play out 100 times. A new operator, full of fire and synthetic confidence from training, would try to carve out his territory. Specialist Cole was just the latest iteration of a timeless archetype. He was big, fast, exceptionally strong, a superb physical specimen who'd excelled in every quantifiable test. But Thorne knew that the things that kept you alive out here weren't quantifiable. They were things like patience, humility, and the wisdom to know which fights to pick. Cole, in his youthful arrogance, had just picked a fight with a ghost. The other men in the room, Harris and Ray's chief among them, formed a loose circle around Cole, their postures a mixture of encouragement and nervous curiosity. They were his cohort, his pack. They saw Sharma as he did, an intrusion, a woman in their space, not one of their own, not a medic or a pilot or an intelligence specialist they'd come to trust, but an unknown variable. Her silence was unnerving to them. They communicated in loud boasts and sharp-edged jokes, a constant broadcast of their own confidence. She communicated in stillness, and it was a language they didn't understand. Sharma felt their scrutiny as a physical weight. She'd been in rooms like this her entire career, rooms that smelled of damp gear and masculine pride, rooms where her presence was an anomaly, a disruption to the natural order. Early in her career, it had angered her. Later, it had frustrated her. Now, it was simply data to be processed. The hostility was a diagnostic tool. It told her everything she needed to know about a unit's discipline, cohesion, and leadership. Echo Squadron, for all its legendary skill, was showing cracks. There was a rot of ego at its core, personified by the young man standing before her, whose knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the bar. He was a product of a system that selected for physical prowess and aggression, but sometimes failed to temper it with the necessary restraint. She knew his file. Cole Daniel, 26 years old, top of his class in every physical metric. 2 successful deployments in a conventional unit before being recruited into the development group. Commended for bravery, reprimanded twice for insubordination. He was a weapon that had not yet been properly calibrated, and he was about to receive a field adjustment. The tension had started an hour earlier. Cole, holding court at the center of the bar, had been recounting a recent training exercise, his voice growing louder with each retelling, each detail more heroic. He spoke of a simulated hostage rescue, embellishing his own role, describing a direct brute force entry that in his telling was a work of tactical genius. Sharma, sitting alone, had listened quietly. She'd read the after-action report. The simulation had been a failure. Cole's genius breach had triggered a booby trap, resulting in the theoretical deaths of 2 teammates and all 3 hostages. His version of the story omitted this inconvenient conclusion. The analyst said we should have gone in quiet through the vents, Cole scoffed, loud enough for the entire room to hear. He glanced directly at Sharma. What do they know? Sitting in a climate-controlled box 1,000 meters away, looking at satellite photos. You don't win fights by being quiet. You win them by being faster and more violent than the other guy. Harris and Ray's nodded in vigorous agreement, their expressions mirroring Cole's contempt for the noncombatants, the support structure they viewed as necessary but inferior caste. Sharma gave no reaction. She simply swirled the whiskey in her glass, her gaze distant. Her lack of response was a vacuum, and Cole's ego rushed to fill it. He saw her as the embodiment of the cautious, bloodless bureaucracy he despised. He strode over, his movements deliberate and aggressive. The crowd parted, sensing drama. When he reached her, he leaned in close, invading her space. His breath smelled of whiskey and arrogance. "You got an opinion on that?" he asked, his voice mocking. "Or do you just sit there and judge from a distance like the rest of them?" She turned her head slowly, met his eyes. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, almost gentle. "I think you should step back, specialist." It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a command. It was simply a statement of fact, a prediction of what a wise man would do. Cole laughed, a harsh performative sound. "Or what?" And that's when he shoved her. Not hard enough to knock her down, just enough to assert dominance. enough to prove a point to his watching peers, enough to show this quiet woman that she didn't belong in their world. The glass hit the floor, and everything changed. What does it take to break through a man's armor? Sometimes it's not a bullet. Sometimes it's just the realization that he's been seen, truly seen, for exactly what he is. The silence in the wolf's den stretched. Seconds became minutes. Cole stood there, his hand still extended from the shove, his face flushed with the cocktail of adrenaline and alcohol, waiting for her to react, waiting for her to give him the satisfaction of anger or fear, waiting for validation that his dominance had been established. She gave him nothing. Just that steady, analytical gaze, like she was watching a child throw a tantrum, like she'd seen this play out 1,000 times before and knew exactly how it would end. Master Chief Thorne moved, not quickly, not with alarm, just a slow, deliberate shift from his seat at the bar. He crossed the room with the unhurried confidence of a man who'd stopped more fights than most people had witnessed. When he reached Cole, he placed a hand on the younger man's shoulder. Firm, paternal. "Specialist," Thorne said quietly, "stand down." Cole's eyes flicked to Thorne, then back to Sharma. His jaw worked. Pride warred with the deep-seated conditioning to obey a senior enlisted leader. For a moment, it could have gone either way. The room held its breath. Then Cole took a step back. But his eyes were still defiant, still convinced he'd won something. Sharma set her glass on the bar, rose from her stool with fluid grace. She was tall, nearly Cole's height, but carried herself differently. No wasted motion, no unnecessary display. She looked at Thorne, gave him the smallest nod of acknowledgement, then walked toward the door. The crowd parted for her. And as she passed, Cole couldn't resist one final jab. "That's right," he muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Run back to your spreadsheets." A few nervous laughs. Harris clapped Cole on the back. Ray's grinned. But Thorne didn't laugh. He just watched Sharma's back as she disappeared into the night. And if any of them had been paying attention, they would have seen something in his weathered face. Not approval of Cole's behavior, not amusement, but something closer to pity. Because Thorne knew what they didn't. And in less than 12 hours, they would all know too. The briefing came at 400 hours. The operators stumbled into the TOC still half drunk, heads pounding, eyes bleary. They expected a standard mission brief. Reconnaissance, surveillance, maybe a raid if they were lucky. But when they entered the Tactical Operations Center, the atmosphere was different. Tense. Urgent. Captain Miller stood at the front of the room, his jaw tight. Behind him, a satellite image glowed on the screen. Mountainous terrain, snow-covered peaks, hostile territory. And beside him stood Sharma. Still in civilian clothes, still quiet, still unremarkable to their hungover eyes. "Gentlemen," Miller began, his voice clipped, "we have a situation. 72 hours ago, one of our reconnaissance drones went down in the Dragon's Teeth mountain range, 200 clicks north of here. The drone was equipped with next-generation optics and encrypted data links, technology we cannot afford to let fall into enemy hands." He clicked a remote. The image zoomed in on a specific valley. Initial SATINT suggests the crash site is in this valley. Early this morning, enemy forces began moving toward the location. We have a narrow window to recover the core components before they do. This is a high-altitude insertion. Extreme weather conditions, limited exfil options. You'll be going in light and fast. Cole shifted in his seat, his headache momentarily forgotten. This was what they lived for. This was real. Miller continued, "Your team lead for this operation will be." He paused, looked at Sharma. And she stepped forward. The room went very, very still. "Your team lead," Miller repeated, his voice carefully neutral, "will be our strategic oversight officer. She has command authority for this mission. You will follow her orders without question. Is that understood?" Silence. Then Cole laughed, An incredulous, disbelieving sound. You're kidding. Miller's expression went cold. Do I look like I'm kidding, specialist? Sir, with all respect, she's not even. Cole caught himself. But everyone knew what he was about to say. She's not even one of us. Sharma's expression didn't change. She simply looked at Cole the same way she'd looked at him in the bar, like a problem to be solved. Specialist Cole, she said quietly, do you believe you could lead this mission better than I can? It was a trap. He knew it was a trap, but his pride wouldn't let him back down, not in front of his team, not after last night. Yes, he said flatly, I do. She nodded, as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. Then let me ask you a different question. What's the temperature at the crash site right now? Cole blinked. What? The temperature, at altitude, in the dragon's teeth. What is it? He didn't know, hadn't thought to check. Cold, he said defensively. It's mountains. -42 degrees Celsius, Sharma said. Wind chill pushing it to -60. Visibility less than 50 meters due to an active storm system. The valley floor is at 4,200 meters elevation. You'll be operating at the edge of hypoxia. Your standard cold weather gear will keep you alive for approximately 90 minutes of exposure before frostbite becomes a certainty. She clicked the remote. A new image appeared. Weather patterns, wind speeds, topographical data. The enemy force moving toward the site consists of approximately 30 combatants, local irregular fighters who know this terrain intimately. They're acclimated to the altitude. They're equipped for the weather, and they're 12 hours closer to the crash site than we are. She looked at Cole. Still think you can do this better? His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. This isn't a breach and clear exercise, specialist. This isn't about being the fastest or the most violent. This is about precision, timing, and understanding that the mountain will kill you faster than any bullet if you don't respect it. She turned to address the full team. We insert at first light. The storm provides cover but also limits our operational window. We have 6 hours to reach the site, recover the core components, and extract before the weather makes exfil impossible. Questions? Reyes raised a hand hesitantly. Ma'am, have you done mountain ops before? It was a fair question, respectfully asked. Sharma's lips curved, not quite a smile. I've done this before, petty officer, trust the process. And there was something in her voice, something quiet but absolute, the kind of certainty that comes from experience, not arrogance. Thorne, standing in the back of the room, crossed his arms. He'd been silent this entire time, watching, evaluating. Now he spoke, his gravelly voice cutting through the tension. Listen up, he said. I've worked with the Admiral before. You do what she says when she says it and you'll come home. You second-guess her, you hesitate, you think you know better. He looked directly at Cole. You won't. The title registered, Admiral. The woman from the bar, the woman Cole had shoved, the woman he'd mocked, was an admiral. Cole's face went pale. His mind raced, connecting pieces he should have seen from the beginning. Her quiet authority, Thorne's deference, the way Captain Miller had stepped aside for her. He'd assaulted a flag officer. And now he was about to go into the most dangerous terrain on Earth under her command. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Sharma saw the realization dawn on his face, but she didn't address it, didn't acknowledge it, because out there in the mountains rank didn't matter, skills mattered, discipline mattered, and she was about to teach them exactly what that meant. Gear up, she said simply. We leave in 30. How do you prove yourself when the mountain is trying to kill you? You stop trying to prove anything, you just survive. The Chinook's rotors beat against thin air. The helicopter labored, engines screaming as it clawed for altitude. Inside the cargo bay, Echo Squadron sat in darkness, their faces illuminated only by the red combat lights. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in the last 10 minutes. Even through their cold weather gear, they could feel the bite of it. the promise of what waited outside. Sharma sat near the front, eyes closed, not resting, processing, running through contingencies, calculating probabilities. She'd done this kind of insertion before, years ago, when she'd been the one sitting in their seats, before the promotions, before the politics, before she'd become the thing these men resented, a leader who commanded from behind a desk instead of beside them in the field. But that was the thing about assumptions. They were only true until they weren't. The loadmaster's voice crackled through their headsets. 2 minutes to drop zone. Sharma's eyes opened. She stood, moved to the ramp, her movements practiced despite the turbulence. The team watched her. Cole watched her, waiting for hesitation, waiting for a mistake that would confirm their prejudices. She checked her gear with methodical precision. Rifle, sidearm, medical kit, climbing equipment, every item exactly where it needed to be. Then she looked back at them. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice cutting through the engine noise. "When we hit the ground, we move fast. The storm is our ally but also our enemy. It hides us from enemy surveillance, but it also limits our navigation. We stay together. No one breaks formation. No one takes initiative. You follow my route exactly. The snow depth here is unstable. One wrong step and you're in a crevasse." Harris muttered something under his breath. Sharma ignored it. "The crash site is 3 clicks northeast of our insertion point. The terrain rises 800 meters over that distance. We're climbing in near whiteout conditions. Visibility will be less than 10 meters. You will lose sight of the person in front of you if you fall more than 3 meters behind. If that happens, you stop. You call out. You wait for me to come back for you. You do not try to catch up. Understood?" Reluctant nods. I said, "Is that understood?" "Yes, ma'am," they responded, the military discipline overriding their resentment. The ramp began to lower. Wind screamed into the cabin, carrying with it a wall of snow and cold that felt like a physical force. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees instantly. The loadmaster gave the signal. Sharma didn't hesitate. She stepped into the storm and disappeared. For a moment the team stood frozen, then Thorne moved. "Go, go, go." They followed, stepping into a world that wanted them dead. The ground was softer than expected, snow up to their knees, the wind so strong it made breathing difficult. Each gust felt like being punched. The helicopter's engines faded almost immediately, swallowed by the storm. And suddenly they were alone. 7 figures in an infinite expanse of white. Sharma's voice came through the comms, calm, steady. "Formation, single file, 3-meter spacing. Thorne, you're my tail end Charlie. Call out if anyone falls behind." They formed up, started moving. And within minutes, Cole understood why she'd been so specific about following her route. The terrain was treacherous. What looked like solid ground would suddenly give way. What appeared to be level snow would hide a boulder or a drop-off. Twice in the first 100 meters, he watched Sharma stop, probe ahead with her trekking pole, then redirect their path around something they couldn't see. She wasn't just navigating. She was reading the mountain, every subtle variation in snow texture, every shadow that suggested a hidden danger. She moved like someone who'd done this before, not recently. But the muscle memory was still there, buried under years of desk work and staff meetings. And slowly, grudgingly, Cole began to understand something. She wasn't here to prove she belonged. She already knew she did. An hour in, the wind picked up. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The cold was becoming painful. Cole's fingers were numb despite the insulated gloves. His face burned behind the balaclava. Each breath seared his lungs. He could hear Harris struggling behind him, his breathing ragged. Ray spoke into the comms. "Ma'am, we need to slow down." "Negative," Sharma's voice came back. "We're already behind schedule. The temperature is dropping faster than projected. If we slow down, we won't make the extraction window." "If we don't slow down, we're gonna lose someone to hypothermia," Ray's countered. Silence on the comms. Then Sharma stopped. The column halted. She made her way back down the line, checking each operator personally. When she reached Harris, she saw what Reyes had seen. The man's movements were sluggish. His speech slurred slightly. Early stages of hypothermia. She pulled a chemical heat pack from her kit, cracked it, and pressed it into his hands. Keep moving. Generate heat. We're almost to the ridge line. There's a lee side where we can take 5 minutes. Can you make it? Harris nodded, though his eyes were glassy. Sharma looked at Cole. Help him stay close. It wasn't a question. Cole moved to Harris's side, offering his shoulder for support. And as they continued climbing, Cole found himself thinking about the briefing, about Sharma's analysis of temperature, exposure time, terrain. She hadn't been reciting textbook knowledge. She'd been warning them, preparing them, and they dismissed it as bureaucratic caution. But she'd been right about everything. 20 minutes later, they crested the ridge. The wind hit them like a wall, nearly knocking them off their feet, but Sharma had timed it perfectly. Just beyond the crest, the terrain dropped into a small depression, a natural windbreak. She directed them down into cover. 5 minutes, she said. Hydrate, eat, check your extremities. They collapsed gratefully. Cole watched Sharma move among them, checking gear, redistributing weight, offering quiet words of encouragement. This wasn't the cold analyst from the bar. This was a leader who knew her people, who understood the edge they were walking. Thorne caught her eye, gave her a subtle nod. She returned it. Then her expression changed. She was looking past them down the slope they'd just climbed. Through the swirling snow, barely visible, were shapes, human shapes, moving up the mountain. The enemy force. They'd been tracked. Sharma's voice dropped to a whisper. We've got company, enemy patrol, approximately 15 contacts, 300 meters and closing. Cole's exhaustion vanished, replaced by adrenaline. This was what they were trained for. This made sense. Harris started to move, instinctively reaching for his weapon, but Sharma's hand shot out, stopped him. Negative, we don't engage. Ma'am, we have superior position, we can. We don't engage, she repeated, her voice hard. Our mission is recovery, not combat. We fire a single shot, every enemy unit in a 10-click radius will converge on this position. We'll never make it to the crash site. Then what do we do? Cole demanded. Sharma looked at him, and for the first time since they'd entered the storm, she smiled, cold, calculating. We use the mountain. What's the difference between courage and recklessness? About 30 seconds of thinking. Sharma moved quickly, not panicked, calculated. She scanned the terrain around them with the intensity of someone running a complex equation in real time. The enemy patrol was climbing the same route they'd taken, moving slower but with the confidence of men who knew this territory. They'd be on top of Echo Squadron's position in less than 10 minutes. Thorne, Sharma said quietly, demolitions, what do you have? The Master Chief didn't question. He knelt, opened his pack. 2 Block C4 detonators, remote triggers. She nodded, pointed to a massive snow cornice hanging off the ridge above them. A natural formation, thousands of tons of compacted snow and ice, held in place by nothing more than cohesion and luck. Can you trigger a controlled avalanche, just enough to cover our tracks and slow them down? Thorne looked up at the cornice, looked back at her. It's possible, but controlled is a generous word. Once that starts moving, it's going to take half the mountainside with it. How long to set the charges? 3 minutes. Do it. She turned to the rest of the team. Reyes, Harris, scout ahead. Find us a route that skirts the eastern face. Stay below the ridge line. Cole, you're with me. Cole blinked. After everything, she was putting him in the most critical position, beside her. He followed her up a small rise, where they had a view of both the approaching enemy and their own exposed position. She dropped prone in the snow, pulled out her binoculars, studied the patrol. They're not random fighters, she said, more to herself than to him. Look at their spacing, their formation. These are trained soldiers. Cole looked through his own optics. She was right. The patrol moved with discipline, weapons ready, covering each other's advances. This wasn't a stumble-upon patrol. They were hunting. "How did they know we were here?" he asked. "They didn't." Sharma lowered her binoculars. "They're heading to the crash site same as us. We just happen to use the same approach route." "Then why not just let them pass?" "Because they won't pass. They'll find our tracks, follow them straight to us." She looked at him directly. "And then we'd have to fight. And fighting here now with Harris compromised and our exfil window closing, we'd lose." It was a brutal assessment, honest, no ego to protect. Cole felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't the woman from the bar. This wasn't the officer he'd imagined. This was someone who'd calculated the odds and decided their lives were worth more than pride. "Why did you pick me?" he asked quietly. "To come with you after last night." "After last night you made a mistake," Sharma interrupted. "A serious one, but that doesn't change what you are. You're strong, you're fast, and right now if this goes wrong I need someone who can fight our way out." She met his eyes. "You screwed up, specialist, but you're still a SEAL, so act like one." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something else, something Cole hadn't expected. It was respect, for the job if not the man. Thorne's voice crackled through the comms. "Charges set, ready on your command." Sharma keyed her radio. "Status on eastern route." Ray's responded. "Viable, steep but viable. We can bypass the next ridge entirely." "Copy, get everyone moving. Thorne, fall back to the team. I'll trigger the charges." "Negative," Thorne shot back immediately. "That's my job." "And my command," Sharma said flatly. "You're more valuable alive than I am. Move." There was a pause, then Thorne's resigned voice. "Roger, on your 6, Admiral." Cole and Sharma stayed in position, watching the enemy patrol climb closer. 200 meters, 150. She held a small remote detonator in her gloved hand, her thumb hovering over the trigger. "How close do we let them get?" Cole whispered. "Close enough that they can't escape the avalanche, far enough that we're clear of the debris field." She checked her watch. "Another 60 seconds." They were so close now Cole could see individual faces through his optics. Young men like him, doing their jobs, following orders. In another life, another war, they might have been on the same side. 30 seconds. The lead enemy soldier stopped. Raised a hand, the patrol halted. The man knelt, examining the snow. He'd found something, a trace, a disturbance. He looked up the mountain, directly at their position. "Now," Sharma said. She pressed the trigger. For a moment nothing happened, just the distant crack of detonators, barely audible over the wind. Then the cornice above them shifted, a rumble, deep and primordial, like the mountain clearing its throat. The enemy patrol heard it too. They looked up just in time to see thousands of tons of snow and ice collapse. The avalanche hit like divine wrath. A white wave that consumed everything in its path. The enemy patrol disappeared instantly, swallowed by the cascade. The roar was deafening. The ground shook. Snow and wind and debris exploded outward, a cloud of destruction that climbed hundreds of feet into the air. Sharma grabbed Cole's jacket. "Move." They ran, sliding, stumbling, racing along the ridge as the avalanche chased them. The debris cloud overtook them, blinding, choking. Cole lost sight of Sharma, lost sight of everything. He just ran, his lungs burning, his legs pumping, pure survival instinct driving him forward. Then hands grabbed him, pulled him sideways, into cover, into a narrow crevasse where the rest of the team had taken shelter. The avalanche thundered past, missing them by meters, and then, slowly, the roar faded. The mountain settled. Silence returned. Cole lay in the snow, gasping, his heart hammering. He looked up to see Sharma beside him, equally breathless but composed. She keyed her radio. "Sound off." One by one the team reported in, all present, all alive. Thorne's voice came through, dry as ever. "That was one hell of a controlled avalanche, ma'am." "It was controlled enough," Sharma replied. She stood, dusted snow from her gear. "Let's move, we've lost 15 minutes." And just like that, they were moving again. Cole pushed himself up, his legs shaking. But something had changed. He looked at the woman leading them through the storm, and he didn't see a bureaucrat anymore. He didn't see an outsider. He saw a warrior. One who just saved all their lives with her mind, instead of her trigger finger. And for the first time since this mission began, Cole started to understand what Master Chief Thorne had tried to tell them. This woman didn't need to prove she belonged. They needed to prove they could keep up. How do you find something that doesn't want to be found? You stop looking with your eyes. You start thinking like the thing you're hunting. The crash site was a graveyard of twisted metal and scorched earth, half buried in snow. The drone had augured in hard, carving a 100-meter scar across the valley floor before coming to rest against a cluster of boulders. Parts of the fuselage were scattered across the impact zone like broken bones. The storm had intensified, wind whipping the snow into horizontal sheets that made visibility almost zero. Sharma called a halt 50 meters from the crash. The team took up defensive positions in a rough perimeter while she surveyed the scene through her optics. Cole, crouched beside her, watched her work. She wasn't just looking at the wreckage. She was analyzing it: trajectory, impact angle, distribution of debris. "The optics core will be in the nose section," she said, pointing to the largest piece of wreckage. "That's where they mount the sensor array. The data link module is aft, near the communications pod." "Could the impact have destroyed them?" Reyes asked. "The core is designed to survive a crash. Hardened casing, shock absorption. But the extreme cold," she trailed off, calculating. "We need to recover it quickly. Electronics this sophisticated don't handle temperature extremes well." Thorne scanned the surrounding terrain. "We're exposed here. Wide open valley, no cover." "I know," Sharma acknowledged. "We go in fast, two-man teams. Thorne and Reyes, you secure the nose section and recover the optics core. Harris and Cole, you're on the communications pod, get that data link module. I'll provide overwatch from this position." Cole frowned. "Ma'am, with respect, shouldn't you be the one recovering the tech? You know what we're looking for better than we do." It was a fair, tactical question, and he asked it with none of the hostility from before. Sharma met his eyes. "I do, but I'm also the best shot here, and if that enemy patrol had friends, they'll be converging on this location. Someone needs to watch your backs. That's me." She pulled her rifle from its sling, settled into a shooting position behind a low berm of snow. The weapon was well worn, the scope scarred but clean. This wasn't ceremonial brass carrying a rifle for show. This was someone who knew how to use it. "You have 10 minutes," she said. "After that, the weather window closes and we're stuck here until the storm passes, which means we're dead. Move." They moved. Cole and Harris approached the communications section of the wreckage carefully. The metal was twisted, sharp edges jutting out like knives. Ice had formed over everything, making the surface treacherous. Harris went in first, his smaller frame allowing him to squeeze through a gap in the fuselage. "I see it," his voice crackled through the comms. "Data link module, aft compartment. It's still intact, but it's frozen into the structure. Gonna need a few minutes to cut it free." "You've got 5, Sharma responded from her overwatch position. "Work fast." Cole kept watch while Harris worked, his eyes scanning the white void around them. The storm made everything surreal. Shapes appeared and disappeared in the blowing snow, shadows that might be rocks or men. He found himself gripping his rifle tighter, his finger hovering near the trigger guard. Then he saw it. Movement. Definite, deliberate movement. 300 meters out, slightly elevated, multiple contacts. "Contact," he called out, forcing his voice to stay calm. 3 o'clock, high ground, multiple hostiles." Sharma's response was immediate. How many? Can't tell, visibility's shit, at least 6, maybe more. From the nose section, Thorne's voice cut in. We've got the optics core. It's loose, but the mounting bracket is frozen. 30 seconds. You've got 20, Sharma said. Then to Cole, keep eyes on those contacts. Call out if they move to engage. Cole watched through his optic. The enemy fighters were moving toward the crash site, but slowly, cautiously. They didn't have a clean sight line either. The storm was working both ways. 15 seconds. Harris emerged from the wreckage, the data link module in his arms. Got it. Thorne, Sharma called out. Clear. The Master Chief and Rays emerged carrying the optics core between them, a cylindrical unit the size of a car tire. Rally on me, Sharma ordered. Controlled withdrawal, do not run. They converged on her position, the precious equipment secured. But the enemy fighters had seen them now. Muzzle flashes sparked in the storm. Bullets cracked overhead, the reports delayed and distorted by the wind. Contact, Cole shouted, returning fire. Short, controlled bursts. Suppressive, not aimed, just enough to keep the enemy's heads down. But more fighters were appearing, flanking positions. The valley was becoming a kill zone. We're about to get boxed in, Thorne observed, his voice tight. Sharma was already moving, leading them toward the eastern valley wall. There's a glacial shelf 200 meters up, natural choke point. We funnel them, make them pay for every meter. They climbed. Bullets snapped past. Harris took a round through his pack, the impact spinning him around, but the gear absorbed it. He kept moving. Cole provided rear security, firing and moving, firing and moving. Standard battle drill, but nothing about this felt standard. They reached the shelf, a narrow ledge of ice and rock that wrapped around the mountain face. Sharma positioned them in a staggered formation, each operator with a clear field of fire down the slope. Conserve ammo, she ordered. Make every shot count. They'll rush us once. When they realize what they're walking into, they'll fall back and try to wait us out. And if they don't fall back, Rays asked. Sharma pulled a fragmentation grenade from her vest, set it beside her. Then we make them regret it. The enemy came in a wave. 15, 20, more than they'd anticipated. Screaming, firing wildly, using the storm as cover. It was brave. It was aggressive. It was exactly what Sharma had predicted. Steady, she called out. Wait for my mark. The enemy climbed closer. 50 meters, 40. Mark! The shelf erupted in disciplined fire. Not the wild spraying of the enemy, but precise, measured shots. Sharma's rifle barked twice. 2 enemy fighters dropped. Thorne fired 3 rounds. 3 more fell. The enemy's momentum broke. They scattered, seeking cover that didn't exist on the exposed slope. Sharma threw her grenade. The explosion was muffled by snow but devastating in the confined space. The enemy fell back, dragging their wounded, and just as she'd predicted, they didn't come again. They settled into positions downslope, content to wait. They're going to pin us here until reinforcements arrive, Harris said, breathing hard. I know, Sharma replied. She was checking her watch, calculating. We've got 90 minutes until our exfil window closes. They've got all the time in the world. Cole looked at her. So what do we do? And Sharma smiled, that same cold, calculating smile from before. We climb. She pointed up. Above them, the mountain face rose at an almost vertical angle, a wall of ice and rock that looked impossible, suicidal. You're insane, Cole breathed. I'm practical, Sharma corrected. They're expecting us to try to fight our way down, to break through their line. They're not expecting us to go up. By the time they realize we're not here anymore, we'll be over the ridge and at the extraction point. Thorne studied the climb. It's possible, barely, but with the equipment. We rope up, we move as one unit. The gear goes in the middle, distributed across all of us. She looked at each of them in turn. I've done climbs like this before. Follow my route exactly. Trust the ice. And we all go home. There was a long moment of silence. Then Cole spoke. "Lead the way, Admiral." And she did. What does it take to earn respect? Sometimes just not letting the mountain win. The climb was a nightmare. Each meter gained was a victory against gravity, exhaustion, and the mountain's determination to kill them. Sharma led, her ice axes biting into frozen surface with practiced precision. She moved with an efficiency that spoke of muscle memory, each placement of hand and foot calculated for maximum security and minimum energy expenditure. Cole climbed behind her, the equipment strapped to his harness making every movement twice as hard. His arms burned. His fingers, even through insulated gloves, had gone past pain into a numb, distant ache. Below him, Harris struggled, his earlier hypothermia making his movements sluggish. Reyes climbed beside Harris, offering quiet encouragement, sometimes physically guiding the other man's hands to secure holds. Thorne brought up the rear, his weathered face set in grim concentration. He'd climbed mountains before, but never like this. Never in these conditions. Never with this much riding on success. The enemy had realized what was happening. Gunfire echoed from below, bullets spanging off the ice face, but the angle was too steep. They were shooting blind, hopping for a lucky hit. Hopping the mountain would do their work for them. 30 meters up, Harris's foot slipped. He slid, his weight coming onto the rope, the sudden jerk pulling at everyone above and below him. The line went taut, cutting into their harnesses. For a terrible moment, the entire team hung there, suspended between earth and sky, their combined weight threatening to pull them all off the face. "Hold," Sharma shouted, her voice cutting through the wind. She'd sunk both axes deep, her legs braced against the ice. "Reyes, secure Harris. Everyone else don't move." Reyes worked quickly, getting another line around Harris, clipping him to a more secure anchor. Gradually, the weight distributed. The tension eased. "Harris," Sharma called down, "can you continue?" A long pause, then weakly, "Yes, ma'am." "Then climb, one hold at a time. I'm not leaving you on this mountain. None of us are." And they didn't. Meter by meter they ascended. Sharma's voice became a constant presence in their headsets, guiding them. Left hand 10 centimeters up. "Good hold, trust it. Right foot, there's an edge you can't see. Use it." She was their eyes when the snow blinded them. Their confidence when their own ran out. 50 meters, 70. The enemy's gunfire had stopped. They'd given up or lost sight of the team in the storm. It didn't matter. The only enemy now was the mountain itself. At 90 meters, Cole's strength gave out. His arms shook uncontrollably. His grip loosened. He felt himself starting to fall. Then Sharma's hand locked around his wrist. She'd climbed back down to him, moving with impossible speed, and now held him with a grip like steel. "Look at me," she commanded. He did. Her eyes were fierce, burning with an intensity that cut through his exhaustion. "You don't quit, not here. Not now, you're a SEAL, act like it." The same words she'd said to him before, but now they meant something different. Now they were a lifeline. Cole found his grip, found his strength, and kept climbing. At the top of the face, they collapsed onto level ground, gasping, shaking, barely alive. But they'd made it, all of them, the equipment intact. Sharma didn't allow them even a moment's rest. "On your feet. We've still got 2 clicks to the extraction point and 15 minutes to make it." They moved like zombies, past exhaustion into some primal place where the body keeps functioning simply because it hasn't been told to stop. The storm was clearing, the clouds breaking apart to reveal patches of hard blue sky. In the distance, they could hear the thrum of helicopter rotors. Their ride home, inbound. They reached the extraction point with 3 minutes to spare. The Chinook settled onto the snow, its ramp already lowering. They stumbled aboard, falling into the webbing seats, the precious equipment secured between them. As the helicopter lifted off, banking away from the mountains, Cole looked back at the dragon's teeth. Somewhere down there, the enemy was still hunting, still searching. not knowing their quarry was already gone. He looked at Sharma. She sat with her eyes closed, her face pale with exhaustion, ice crusted in her hair. She looked small, human, vulnerable. But Cole knew better now. He'd seen what she was capable of, not despite her gender or her rank or her background, because of all of it, every experience that had shaped her, every battle she'd fought to prove herself. It had forged something harder than steel. She'd saved them, not with superhuman strength or impossible heroism, but with competence, with intelligence, with the quiet, unglamorous work of thinking 3 steps ahead and refusing to let the mountain win. That was real strength. That was real leadership. And Cole, for the first time in his career, understood the difference. What happens when the mission ends? Sometimes the hardest fight begins. The debriefing room at Forward Operating Base Kestrel was cold and sterile. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the metal table where Echo Squadron sat. They were clean now, showered and changed, but the exhaustion still clung to them like a second skin. The frostbite on Harris's fingers had been treated, the bruises and cuts catalogued. They were alive when they had no right to be. The recovered equipment sat in a secure case at the center of the table. Mission accomplished. Against impossible odds in impossible conditions, they'd succeeded. But Cole couldn't shake the feeling that something else was about to happen. Captain Miller entered first, walking with a barely perceptible limp, his injuries from a previous deployment that still bothered him in cold weather. Behind him came 2 men in the crisp uniforms of the Judge Advocate General's Corps, military lawyers. Cole's stomach dropped. Then Sharma entered. She was no longer in tactical gear. She wore a crisp service uniform, every crease perfect, every insignia in place. The silver star of her rank gleamed on her collar. Her hair was pulled back in a regulation bun. She looked every inch the Rear Admiral she was. And Cole finally, truly understood what he'd done. A stunned silence fell over the operators. They'd known she was senior. They'd known she had authority. But seeing the rank, the uniform, the undeniable reality of who she was, it was different. It made the bar incident feel less like a mistake and more like a crime. Cole's face went white, his hands clenched on the table. He stared at Sharma, his mind replaying that moment in the wolf's den. The shove, the mockery, the complete, arrogant dismissal of who she was. He'd assaulted a flag officer. There was no walking away from that. Miller cleared his throat, his voice strained. Echo Squadron, as you are now aware, Rear Admiral Sharma was here conducting a command-level assessment of this unit's operational readiness. Her review is now complete. He gestured for Sharma to speak. Sharma stepped forward, her gaze sweeping across the men at the table. When her eyes rested on Cole, they held no anger, no vindictiveness, just that same dispassionate, evaluative intensity he'd seen in the mountains. My assessment is twofold, she began, her voice calm and even. First, regarding the mission, despite extreme environmental conditions and a well-laid enemy ambush, you successfully recovered critical strategic assets and returned with 0 friendly casualties. Your performance under fire, your core skills, and your teamwork were exemplary. She nodded to Thorne, to Reyes. Master Chief, Petty Officer Reyes, your actions were commendable. Then she turned her attention fully to Cole. Harris and Reyes beside him seemed to shrink in their seats. However, Sharma continued, my assessment of this squadron's command climate and discipline is far less positive. What I observed prior to the mission was a culture of unchecked ego, a lack of professional respect, and a dangerous disregard for protocol. She let those words hang in the air. This culture directly led to Specialist Cole's insubordination and assault in the wolf's den. One of the legal officers stepped forward with a file. His voice was flat, bureaucratic. Specialist Cole, you are hereby charged under the Uniform Code of Military Justice with assault on a superior commissioned officer, conduct unbecoming and dereliction of duty. You will be placed under restriction pending court-martial. The words hit like hammer blows. Harris flinched as if struck. Reyes looked away. Cole simply stared at the table, his face a ruin of shame. He didn't protest, didn't make excuses. He had no defense. He'd done exactly what they said he'd done, and the woman he'd assaulted had just saved his life. Sharma let the weight of the moment settle in. The room was absolutely silent except for the hum of the lights. Then she spoke again, however. Everyone looked up. I also observed Specialist Cole's conduct during the mission. After his initial errors in judgment, he followed orders without question. He performed his duties effectively, and he risked his own life to help secure the objective. She looked at the legal officers. My official report will reflect his actions during the operation, which I will recommend be taken as mitigating factors during sentencing. She turned back to Cole, and her voice, while still firm, carried something different, something almost gentle. He failed as a man. He did not fail as a warrior. Cole's throat tightened. He didn't deserve her mercy, didn't deserve her protection. He judged her, dismissed her, disrespected her in every possible way, and she was still trying to save his career. Sharma stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. You are strong, Specialist. You are brave, but you mistake aggression for strength. You mistake volume for authority. She paused. The mission was successful not because of brute force, but because of discipline, observation, and the ability to adapt. We didn't defeat the mountain by punching it. We defeated it by understanding it. Her words were clinical, a diagnosis, not a condemnation. You have the potential to be a great operator, she continued. But not until you learn that lesson, not until you understand that real strength is quiet, that real power is control, that the most dangerous person in the room is rarely the loudest. Cole felt something break inside him, not his spirit, something harder to name, his pride maybe, or just the armor he'd built around his insecurities. Whatever it was, it cracked, and through the cracks came something he hadn't felt in a long time. Humility. I'm sorry, ma'am, he said quietly. The words felt inadequate, but they were all he had. You're right about all of it. Sharma nodded once. Apologies are words, Specialist. What matters is what you do next. Master Chief Thorne, who had been silent throughout, finally spoke. His gravelly voice filled the room. Admiral's right about the kid. He screwed up, but he learned. I saw it on that mountain. Saw him stop trying to prove himself and start doing the job. He looked at Cole. He's got potential. Be a waste to throw him away. The legal officer frowned. Sir, regardless of potential, the assault occurred. There are consequences. I'm aware of the consequences, Sharma interrupted quietly, and Specialist Cole will face them, but I've commanded enough people to know the difference between someone who's irredeemable and someone who's just never been properly led. She looked at Miller. Captain, I'm recommending Specialist Cole be reassigned from Echo Squadron to a training cadre for 6 months. Administrative punishment, supervised rehabilitation, a chance to rebuild his career the right way. Miller nodded slowly. I'll endorse that recommendation, Admiral. The legal officer looked unhappy but nodded. We'll adjust the charges accordingly. Non-judicial punishment under Article 15, not court-martial. Cole's head spun. She just saved him. Again. Not by making excuses, not by downplaying what he'd done, but by seeing past it to what he could become. Thank you, ma'am, he managed. Sharma's expression didn't soften, but something in her eyes changed. Don't thank me, Specialist. Prove me right. Become the operator I know you can be, or prove me wrong and waste this second chance. The choice is yours. She turned to address the full squadron. This team has world-class skills. I've seen it firsthand. But skills without discipline are just chaos waiting to happen. Without respect for the chain of command, without understanding that every person in this organization has value, from the analysts to the logistics officers to the flag officers, you're just dangerous. to yourselves, and to the mission. She looked at each of them in turn. You don't have to like your leadership. You don't have to agree with every decision, but you will respect the institution. You will respect the rank, and you will respect each other. Because out there in the mountains, in the storms, when everything goes wrong, that's all you have. Thorn stood, came to attention, understood Admiral. The rest of the squadron followed. Even Cole, despite everything, stood tall. Sharma returned the gesture with a crisp salute. Then she picked up her cover, turned, and walked out of the room. The moment the door closed, the tension broke. Harris let out a breath he'd been holding. Ray's slumped in his chair. Cole just stood there, processing. Thorn looked at him. You know how lucky you are. Yes, Master Chief. Do you really? Thorn stepped closer. She could have destroyed you, ended your career with a single phone call. Instead, she gave you a path forward. You understand what that means. Cole nodded. It means I have to be better. It means you have to be worthy of it, Thorn corrected. That woman just climbed a mountain in a blizzard to recover equipment that could have been destroyed. Then she climbed down. Then she saved your ass twice, once on that mountain, once in here. He poked Cole's chest. You ever disrespect her or anyone like her again, and I will personally ensure you spend the rest of your career scrubbing latrines. Are we clear? Crystal, Master Chief. Thorn held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Good, now get out of here. You've got paperwork to fill out. Cole left the debriefing room and stepped into the morning sun. The desert was warming up, the cold of the mountains already feeling like a distant memory. But he could still feel the ice on his skin, could still hear Sharma's voice in his headset guiding him through the climb. You don't quit, not here, not now. He pulled out his phone, opened a note, and typed, Real strength is quiet. Real power is control. The most dangerous person in the room is rarely the loudest. He'd read it every morning, remember it every day, until it wasn't just words anymore. Until it was who he was. The sun rose over forward operating base Kestrel, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and cold. The jagged peaks of the dragon's teeth stood serene and majestic in the distance, their fury from the previous night now just a memory. Anna Sharma stood on the perimeter of the base looking out at those peaks. Her work here was done. The report was filed. The necessary chains of command were in motion. Cole would face his punishment, but he'd have his second chance. The squadron would heal, stronger and more disciplined for the harsh lesson it had received. She heard footsteps on the gravel behind her. Didn't need to turn to know who it was. Master Chief Thorn stopped a few feet away, holding 2 steaming mugs. He offered one to her. Coffee, Admiral. The title was natural now, respectful. She took the mug, warmth seeping into her cold hands. Thank you, Master Chief. They stood in silence, watching the sunrise. 2 very different people from 2 different worlds. The flag officer from the world of strategy and policy. The senior enlisted leader from the world of mud and blood. Yet they shared a common language, one spoken in action rather than words. You know, Thorn said, his voice a low rumble, the kid's going to be okay. You did him a favor. I did the service a favor, Sharma corrected gently. A weapon that cannot be controlled is a danger to its wielder. Fair enough. Thorn took a sip of his coffee. Still, not many officers I know would have handled it that way, in the bar or out on that mountain. There is only one way to handle things, she said, her gaze fixed on the distant peaks. The right way. Thorn nodded slowly, accepting the simple, profound truth of her statement. He finished his coffee, gave her another nod of respect and walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She watched the last of the stars fade from the sky as the sun crested the horizon, flooding the valley with light. The world was full of noise, full of ego, full of people who believed their own stories, but the mountain didn't care for stories. The storm didn't care for rank. The enemy didn't care for arrogance. They only yielded to quiet competence, to the disciplined application of will, to the understanding that strength wasn't about dominance or volume or the ability to push others around. Strength was about control, about knowing when to speak and when to be silent, when to fight and when to climb, when to punish and when to teach. Somewhere in the base behind her, Cole was beginning his journey toward understanding that. He'd stumble, he'd doubt, but he'd get there. She'd seen it in his eyes on the mountain, that moment when he stopped trying to prove himself and started doing the work. That was the moment that mattered. The moment when you stopped being loud and started being lethal. When you stopped demanding respect and started earning it. When you realized that the person across from you, whether they were male or female, officer or enlisted, quiet or loud, might be the one who saves your life. And you'd better be worth saving. Anna Sharma finished her coffee as the sun climbed higher. The sky turned from purple to blue, vast and infinite. Another day, another base, another group of operators who would learn these lessons the hard way. Because that was the job. Not to be liked, not to be understood, but to be right when it mattered most. To stand in the wolf's den and absorb the shove without falling. To lead through the storm without losing anyone. To teach without breaking. To correct without destroying. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And when the glass hits the floor, when the mountain tries to kill you, when everything comes down to one decision in one impossible moment, that's when you find out who you really are. Not the person you pretend to be in front of your peers, but the person you become when no one's watching except the storm. That's who Anna Sharma was. And now, after one long night in the mountains, Echo Squadron finally knew it too. Strength is not the power to dominate, it's the discipline to control what power you have.